Carnism is the invisible belief system that conditions us to eat certain animals. It's essentially the opposite of veganism. Carnism is a dominant belief system. That means it's invisible, it's entrenched or institutionalized, it shapes norms, laws, beliefs, behaviors, etc. And when we are born into an entrenched system such as carnism, we inevitably absorb that system's logic as our own. We internalize carnism. We learn to look at the world through the lens of carnism. The best way to explain what carnism is through an example. Imagine that you're a guest at a dinner party and your host serves you a delicious beef stew. And so you ask your host for the recipe. And flattered, she replies, well, the secret is in the meat. You need to start out with 3 pounds of extra lean golden retriever. Your reaction is an example of carnism. We tend to assume that it's only vegans and vegetarians who bring their beliefs to the dinner table, but most of us don't learn to eat pigs but not dogs, for example, because we don't have a belief system when it comes to eating animals. Carnism is also a global phenomenon. In meat-eating cultures around the world, people tend to have a small handful of animals out of thousands of possible species that they've learned to classify as edible. All the rest we classify as inedible and disgusting to consume. And so even though the type of species consumed changes from culture to culture, members of all cultures tend to find their own choices to be rational and the choices of other cultures to be irrational and disgusting and often even offensive. Vegetarianism is essentially a form of carnism because if we think about it, the dairy and egg industries, for instance, those are carnistic industries. They arguably are some of the cruelest of all carnistic industries. And vegetarians, like non-vegetarians and non-vegans, use similar psychological distortions in order to consume the excretions of non-human animals, eggs and dairy. For instance, most vegetarians would not drink the milk of pigs or horses, and yet they drink cow's milk. Most vegetarians would not eat pigeons' eggs, and yet they eat hens' eggs. So we can see similar constructs at work here. What carnism teaches us to do is to block our awareness and shut down our empathy. It's organized around a set of defense mechanisms that distort our perceptions of meat, eggs, and dairy and the animals that we eat so that we can feel comfortable enough to consume them. So very often the facts do not sell the ideology when we're talking about veganism simply because the carnistic mentality is so deeply ingrained in us, and eating animals has become not only such a social norm, but it's reinforced by the dominant culture in so many different ways. It's very important to appreciate that eating animals is not simply a matter of personal ethics. Good people participate in harmful behaviors all the time, and that doesn't make them bad people. Eating animals is the inevitable end result of a deeply entrenched oppressive system. So the problem is not a lack of compassion and empathy. The problem is the system that causes us to disconnect from the natural compassion and empathy that we already have. People care about animals, and they care about justice, and they care about the truth.